Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to talk about Storage Gateway, except in this lecture we're not going to talk about Storage Gateway in the context of backup and disaster recovery. We're going to talk about Storage Gateway in the context of using it as a mechanism to migrate our existing virtual machine or our existing production environment to the AWS cloud. So let's quickly recap on the different types of storage gateways available to us. We've got our gateway cached volumes, which is iSCSI based storage. We've got our gateway stored volumes, which again is iSCSI based block storage. And then we've got our gateway virtual tape libraries, which is iSCSI based virtual tape solution. Okay, so let's have a look at this network diagram to help us understand how this works. So off to the left we have our data center, and off to the right we have our AWS environment. Now our data center might consist of we might be virtualizing within our data center. So we have our on-premise host. This could be a Hyper-V host, this could be an ESX host, this could be a Zen host, and then we're running a whole bunch of application servers on this host, and the application servers are storing their root volumes as VMDK files, or basically as virtualized disks, so root device volumes, and they're being stored either using a DAS or a SAN. And essentially what we do is we install our AWS storage gateway onto this environment. It is then going to take snapshots of our VMDK files or of our root device volumes, and it's going to replicate these snapshots up over HTTPS to the AWS storage gateway service, and it will store these snapshots as objects within S3. Now, in a backup and recovery scenario, if we were to lose a VM or to lose our SAN or something, we could essentially replicate these virtual machines back using the AWS storage gateway service to the AWS storage gateway VM, and then restore the images. But we can also use this scenario as a migration tool, because what we can do is when our snapshots are stored on S3, we can actually mount those snapshots as EBS volumes and attach them to EC2 instances. And so in this way you can actually use storage gateway not just as a backup and disaster recovery tool. You can also use it as a tool to migrate your existing infrastructure to AWS. And you might decide, once you've done a successful migration, to get rid of your data center entirely. Now, if you are going to use Storage Gateway to do VM migrations and to move your entire data center over to AWS with the view of getting rid of it, you need to make sure your snapshots are going to be consistent. So snapshots provide a point-in-time view of data that's been written to your AWS Storage Gateway. However, snapshots only capture the data that's been written to your storage volume, and it can exclude the data that hasn't been buffered either by the client or by the operating system. And by client, we just mean application. So sometimes if you're using SQL Server, for example, or you're using MySQL or SharePoint, the application itself might actually be holding data inside its buffer, holding the data in RAM, hasn't committed it down yet to disk. Similarly, your operating system might be doing this. So if you need to make if you want your snapshots to be consistent, you're going to need to make sure that your application or your operating system has flushed this buffer data down to the storage volumes. So how do you do this? Well, if you read the Amazon documentation, it tells you to contact either your operating system provider or you contact the application provider. With the OS provider, it will give you some tools that you can use for both Windows and for Linux to ensure that all buffered data is snapped down to disk. But when you're talking about specific applications, things like SQL Server or MySQL, it's not as straightforward. So the easiest way to guarantee that your operating system and file system data has flushed their buffered data down to disk is to take it offline. So essentially you shut down the virtual machine. By doing this, you're forcing your operating system and your applications to flush all the data down to disk. And once that virtual machine is turned off, you take a snapshot, and then once that snapshot is complete, you can bring the virtual machine back online, and that volume would have then been replicated to S3. And then what you want to do is you want to go into S3 and essentially turn that snapshot data. You go into the storage Gateway console, and you want to turn that snapshot data into an EBS volume and mount it to an EC2 instance, and then just power it up and do some tests and see whether or not all your data is there. So that's it for this lecture, guys. It's pretty straightforward. We didn't mention it in domain 1 because we just wanted to keep domain 1 around backup and restores. We didn't really want to talk about migration, but I wanted to specifically call it out here because you can get different scenarios where it talks about using storage gateway as a service as a migration tool. So it is definitely possible. So that's the thing to remember going into the exam, is you can use storage gateway to migrate your existing VMs to AWS. But the one thing you have to bear in mind when doing this is you need to ensure that your snapshots are going to be consistent. And the best way to do this is to take the existing VMs offline and then do the snapshot, or alternatively, you can use a number of tools for Windows or Linux to make sure that there's nothing held in the buffer. But if you're looking at an application basis, so if you're trying to make sure that SQL Server or MySQL Server, you're trying to take a consistent snapshot of those, the best way, honestly, is just to power down the VM, take a snapshot, and then power it back up again once that snapshot is complete. Okay, that's it for me. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.